email is going to need an incoming email coming to the Odoo server, right? We discussed aliases yesterday, between you and I, Tracy, that if sales
Yes.
team has an alias, we can take emails. This is again one of those aliases situation. So if you define an alias here on your production environment, it will be mmherbs-odoo.odoo.com. But on the email server, you can handle those emails that get sent to expense or any other alias you choose to be forwarded to this email in Odoo. When an email is received, it will automatically be created as an expense. The OCR is a capability as well here. So if you activate OCR, it will have to be that you pay for OCR credits, but I don't recommend starting with that right away. The option to reimburse in pay slips is also available, but that's another thing that you don't have right now because your payroll is not an Odoo, and there is actually no plan to have that here because of the tax rates differences and everything. So
Right.
baseline expense module is really very simple. If a simple employee comes in, you can give them a predefined list of expenses that they can choose to get the reimbursements for or choose to record the expenses for. Creating them is as simple as creating products. Now these products will have their own factor of not being anything else but just expense by being service and an expense itself. So if I click on this my expense to report, I'm asked what is the description, and along with that, since I have the access to everything else, I can see the account and everything. But if you just have a product defined, the product, Karen, we discussed that there is a possibility of setting up an expense account directly on the service product. You see, there is not a lot of selections here, even though it comes through the product setup. But since this is supposed to be an expense service product, you just define the expense account. And if there is any taxes that apply to it, you define that. You define the baseline cost. Then you go forward. This is on a staging, so I can go make that happen. So for now, I'll say this one is lunch expenses, and then the expense account is going to be, if there is there an account in the list that we can use for this or close to it?
Mm-hmm. Meals.
Yeah. So we pick the meals account and put it here. Now for a normal user, if we also replicate that, I'll go in and come up with something who doesn't have a lot of access available to their profile. Users. Let's say we pick Maria as an example, right? So with Maria, I'm gonna say she has access to all the other things, but she doesn't have access to. Um, I'm gonna simulate as if they don't have any access to any accounting things at all, right? So in here, inventory user, purchase user. So just a baseline user here, and I'll go and reset the password on them. Copy. Now I'll open up this environment as Maria, logging in as her. And you can also see that the expense module, she has no access. But at the same time, since she is an internal user, and as far as I believe, she also has a factor of being an employee in the list as well, right? So with that done, if we come in and we sign in,
Does
don't
it
worry
matter?
about the Dr. Clark Zentrum.
Okay.
This is the first one going in. It's a struggle for us when we have to choose which website to keep on the link open. I believe the team on our side was working through fixing some errors for Dr. Clark's Zentrum. That's why this one came up. Now, in this condition, if I go into expenses, I don't see a lot of the things, right? Just my expenses. So this means the same way you can't see attendance for some people, other people, other employees, you can't see expenses reported by other people. So if Maria's coming in and she says, I have something to report, You see, nothing specific comes up here. No accounting settings, at least for the chart of account. Then you go in and then you define what is it that we did. Lunch 21 June, and then we select the product. So, right, so lunch expenses. If I have access to changing the product, I can go in and define a new product. But if I don't even have access to that, it will also stop me here. Now the unit price comes in, right? This is a predefined reimbursement amount. But if something is not predefined and you want them to be able to change something, this is the clarity that you have there. So if it's $100 and you say you want 1.5 times the $100, that can go, right? It can be any factor of addition. Now, appropriating this expense towards a pre-specific budget for cost accounting, that's possible through the analytic account selection. Now, if you have an analytic account, let's say a project is going, you'll already be able to see and find the analytic account for that. But if you have a list of analytic accounts that apply to other things as well, like the department expense or maybe a specific budget that's preset, that can also go. You just select the analytic account, and then at the same time as it does the analytic entry, it will also do the accounting entry, but those two things can be completely separate. If it needs to be analytic distribution spread across different departments, that can also happen. So if you select multiple tags here and those tags happen to have a distribution pattern set to them in the accounting, this will also go. For now, let's just say cafe and conference. Do you have any analytic account for roadshows? Because I
No.
can think that is usually the time when people do have expenses that they need to reimburse for them.
That goes to just the MMH brand when it's marketing expenses.
Makes complete sense. Let's take that then. Now, in this condition, you see this option to attach the receipts. This usually comes up automatically right here. So you can have a process where you say a receipt is needed to take this forward. Then you just attach the receipt, whatever receipt you want to do. It gets attached and you can keep this here. Now, this is an expense that you have listed down, but unless you create a report for that and include it in something that's being submitted to the manager, it can stay in the list. So my expenses to report plus all my expenses, these two menus are separate for the exact same reason. Now, these are all the expenses. So every employee will see this. If they have something that they didn't report yet, it will be in this segment. As soon as they create a report, it will be under validation. And then if it's accepted by accounting and it needs to be reimbursed, then it will be in this segment of to be reimbursed. Talking about this, in this situation, you don't see the factor of any selection available for the employee, right? But still, you see here, if we go in, that this is paid by the employee as in to reimburse.
So can I ask a couple questions, Zubair?
Sure.
This particular item you gave a fixed cost to, so then you just adjust how many. Can we also have it where it doesn't have a fixed amount and they enter in how much was spent?
It's usually dependent on the product, right? So with the product, the unit price can be a predefined thing, and then you adjust the quantity to get where you want. It's not a fixed amount situation in that scenario. Do you think it's going to get in the way somewhere?
Well, like for a Costco reimbursement, this is perfect because it's always the same dollar amount. But if you
Hmm.
take somebody to lunch, you could be spending anywhere from $30 to $150 or more, depending on how many people. So, and
Right.
how big the tip was. So some products we might want to just enter the dollar amount. Other products, this format would work. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, can the product be set up to work where you enter dollar instead of entering price?
No,
Or
but there is a way. So you see this other example right there is just general expenses. In this,
right.
you only have a single dollar amount, right? You adjust your unit number to be the exact thing that you need it to be. Instead of it being a fixed price thing, you just say it's a single dollar amount, and then you say whatever amount you spend. So 150, then it becomes 150. That is the other way around because it works on the basis of pre-selected products. If we say that it needs to be for anything, a normal employee cannot make a decision of which account, chart of account it needs to go to. That's why the use of products is the best idea here. Have something that's called miscellaneous expenses with just a single dollar as a fixed amount on that, and it will automatically give you this thing.
Okay, so if you do it as $1, then the quantity.
Right. Now,
Okay.
coming to the other option,
Employees might have a really hard time entering it as quantity instead of dollar.
um, Tracy, there is a way. There is a way for what you want exactly as well, but it's not recommended. So if you see and you don't define a cost on the product, you can go back to entering a dollar amount, but it will take the number, right? It still works on the basis of product. So if you need it to be like this, something that doesn't have a pre-specific cost, you can just define zero, but it's not recommended that you go down that route because if you give them full control, maybe you have one thing, maybe a miscellaneous thing that has this setting, but most of the things should be predefined how much amount you take reimbursements for, because companies do have policies around how much you can get reimbursed. That's why that is the recommended practice. But if you go back and fix this to zero, it will automatically give them the option of entering the dollar amount, but it still
Gotcha.
works on the same method.
Okay,
Well, just because they request something also doesn't mean we have to give it to them.
right. My second
That
question, if
Right.
are you still signed in as Maria?
Hmm.
When
Yep,
you
I
went
am.
when you went to that screen where it said it only shows you the my expenses,
Hmm.
what happens if she X's out my expenses? Will it show her
What?
everybody's up on the top on the filter?
Oh,
If you
nope.
take that out, would it put everybody's there?
No, let me verify. I believe there is a user rights setting that's there, but let me still verify. So in this case, if we
Okay,
and I can go and check in the rules, and if there is no rule, we can define a rule to let the employee only access their own thing.
that would be preferred. At
I
least
can
from
understand
my
why.
perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, everybody doesn't need to know.
All right, so
Every-
I'll choose Lexi here, and then there is another one to go.
What do they want?
Yep, I think there is a rule. Let me verify from the back end as well. Rule, because this is the same method as the attendance records go, because nobody else can access attendance records unless you're given a specific access. Expense model. Yep. Right. So employee expenses, employee user ID is equal to user ID. If they have a user ID, yes, they can only see their own things. There is a
Okay,
rule.
thank you.
So if you have to verify that here as well, I have now two things, one for Lexi, right? And then one for Maria. But if I come from Maria, I can still see just the one.
Beautiful.
Now, the next thing is, since Maria did this thing where she has this employee to reimburse situation, you cannot change after you have it submitted, right? But if you create at that time, you can select what method was there. So initially, now coming back in as Maria, you see if I choose expenses with a zero cost, I can put in a dollar amount
Mhm.
and I don't see the accounting setting. That's why giving them a specific list of things to work through is the best idea. Now, if I choose company, the method doesn't change here. But if it's employee at the moment and company at the moment, there's two different workflows. There is an additional step for paid required for this. But whereas if it's company, there is no step for paid. It just gets posted and that's done and completed. At this point, if I say I go back to this one that we did, the next step is based on Maria's own things. Whoever is set to be the approver of her expenses in the employee profile will get the next request. So let's find out who that is. Somebody's deploying something. Using a database that's being used by developers at the same time as a here's a deployment going.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. There's only a handful of things that we keep, so essentially updating the training database back and forth is not really a possibility all the time. But let's see if I can go to this instead of the other one. Training 17. This one also looks like it's updating too.
I would think so. We should be able, for example, to create a meal that's an open-ended for dollar amount, but we tell it what accounts it goes to.
Yes.
And then create a Costco that's a $60.
Well, the meal
that's-
one already tracks 2 meals, so it shouldn't be that hard to.
Yeah, we should be able to, I think.
But it's
I'm
already a
liking
product
this
there
for
that goes to meals.
submitting, and then you scan in your receipt to attach it.
Yeah,
It's kind of nice.
it is, except for the part where, in our case, where the company is doing the paying for it. It doesn't necessarily transfer over to the account that it's supposed to when you're like on the road, and some of it's travel and some of it's food and some of it's this and some of it's that. So I can, like, for the reimbursements, it seems like a great idea. For the other, it's a really good chance to double enter everything.
Why do you think that is? Because Karen, at the end of it all, you will still have a process of posting the expense into the final accounts. If somebody submits an expense on the company selection, you will come in the final step after the manager's approval.
Yes, well, that does work great when people are doing what they're supposed to. We have a hard time with that here.
I'm
And we have
replicating the same steps on this.
We have a broad base of technical, or a broad group of technical skills. So
It'll be interesting though. This is kind of neat. I've never seen one in a system before, so to me, it's kind of neat looking. Haven't gotten to play with it.
well, if
All right,
you
so I'm coming in as Maria on this new space as well. I believe this one is not going to be touched because this is client training. The other one was really just a interim space for developers as well. So this one I believe will stay. Now coming back in as Maria again, I'll do the same thing once over. In the expense module from my side, I'll set up the expense products. Expenses with no fixed dollar amount. Let's go take that. Now this is your employee sending in their thing, right? So in that case, they don't have a selection of who else. But considering that not all employees will have a user profile, the manager could use the module to submit the employee expenses for their subordinates without a user. If they have the access, they come in and they start an expense report. You can be selecting, you can go ahead and select somebody else as well. So this means department managers, people in the company with authority can also use this module to record expenses for other people if they're given the right access. Going back in as Maria, I go take the same thing, lunch.
If we limit it to only managers enter, could I enter for Maria, but if she looks,
Yes.
she can see that I entered it?
That won't really be available right off the bat, but yes, it can be done. Because right now the
Okay.
standard employee access is allowed to create expenses, but if we stop that behavior, we'll have to go make that change.
Gotcha. Okay.
So expenses, $150, and then to employee reimburse and the MMH brand factor. Attaching the receipt, the same step. I'll just take something here. Now going back in as admin, the same step where I check for Maria and then find out one employee who handles the expense reporting. So in this case, expense doesn't have anybody, right? So I'll set you, Tracy, to be the approver of the expenses there. I see there is a problem with your user profile. I believe it's attached to Tools for Healing, I guess. Let me fix that as well.
Oh, no.
That seems to be common.
Because every time somebody created something, it used to be a problem in that direction. Tracy Sweeter, it looks, oh, you don't have an employee profile. That's also possible too.
I should have, because my credit goes to it every month.
Not the proper way. Hold on. So I can see there's both profiles are there, but if I find on Maria, you can't. In fact, your time off is set to be. Oh, I know the reason why. Your user doesn't have access to being in the approver rule.
Ah,
Users.
we could always say that's Karen.
Yeah. Now, you being the person who handles expenses. So team approver, right? In this case, if you're the team approver, you can only approve for people in your hierarchy. But if you're all approver, you can approve for anyone. So this is really a fail-safe. Now, administrator is the person controlling all the settings as well. So right now, I'll just keep you team approver at the moment. And for you, Karen, no other access allows. If you have access to accounting, being an accountant, you can make this happen. So coming back into Maria's profile, Tracy Sweeter is available. I'll pick that. And I'll go back to Maria once over. Now, this is her profile. If we create a report, this is the next step, right? You could have multiple expenses coming into this situation. Now, whichever ones you select, it kind of piles down on this list, right? So you can do it for multiple selections by going to one expense and creating a report from there, or you can create a report and add multiple lines into this as from here, or on the other hand, if I get rid of this report just now, yep, nothing created. So I can take my expense, right? And multiple expenses can be created into a report directly from the list. So it depends on the person trying to. So the company policy says that you have to do it per week basis. You can just keep adding the expenses on the go, and then per week basis create a report. Now, if there are multiple expenses, if you go back once over, I'll just go create another one on a different date. So action duplicate 22 for 120. The same analytic account and another receipt attached to this. Now we have two to report, right? If I go in and create a report from here, it takes both of them forward. It doesn't pick the only reference. It only picks the date now because there is multiple. If it's only one, it will pick the reference description directly from the expense being reported. Now this is my expense report. I can keep it in draft until I'm sure I have to submit it. As soon as I click submit to manager, this goes away from my domain and an approval request is generated for Tracy. Now I'll go back and go to the user profile for Tracy. Change password. The reason why I don't like using this training one is maybe you're already using this for something and then I change passwords on the go and it kind of gives you bad access.
I'll remember not to use it today.
I might be creating a new one real soon, maybe by tomorrow or the day after, because getting the updated data always needs a manual input coming in.
Yeah.
So it's going to have a bunch of old data sets from a few days ago. Right now, the way it is. All right. So
Lisa,
in this condition,
have you send me my password? So
I asked Eli to send everybody their passwords. Didn't you get the passwords for the training?
yes, but if you change it doing this, if I need it, I know who to ask.
Ah, all right. I One good thing, you can still use the change password option. Ask Eli, ask me. We can just change the password on the go. That's what the best way to go is. Now,
Okay.
on your profile, there is an expense report that tells me there is an activity that I have to do. Now, for Maria, you couldn't see anything, right? Except for the reset to draft. Now, you have the option to approve or refuse. Now, that's the first level of approval. If you refuse, it goes back. And then if she wants to pick it up and then do some changes and put it in the process again, that's possible. But if you approve, it goes to the next level. Now, since you
What
also
if I
have
wanted,
accounting,
what if I wanted to refuse one and approve the other of the two?
no, the expense report overall has to be approved or refused because this is what's going to go into accounting.
Apparently, it's the answer.
Okay. So
But
if they
the
answer
good
one
thing,
wrong, the rest are right, they have to redo it in order to get it approved.
yeah, you refuse, right? If I go ahead and refuse now, you can write the reason for the refuse. One doesn't look good.
You
Right.
don't know how to add.
They see this thing, they set it back to draft, remove the one that you don't like or is not accepted, and then submit again, right? So for now, I'll just do the whole thing as you. This is although it's you, but since you're the manager, you can control the expenses for your team as well. I go back and approve again. Now, currently, you have accounting access. Can you give me a minute?
Yeah, that's fine. You muted, Zubair.
I think he is doing that on purpose for the minute.
Oh, okay, that could be. I thought he needed to go somewhere.
I bet he's answering someone's question.
That could be.
Sorry, I had to plan the deployment for day end today with
It's
a team member. All right, so in this case, currently you see you're the advisor, therefore you are seeing the access to post, right? But if I take away the advisor and make you only available for billing, you're getting the advisor access from somewhere else as well. I'll have to see what that is.
I'm gonna guess that's probably the you have the
Usually the inventory administrator calls for advisor as well.
I'm not counting moment.
Yep, it's 6 now. Now, if we go back in and refresh the page here, right? This one with the billing access is still available. Why? Because in this case, you still have access to do the journal entries. Now, considering that if a manager doesn't, since you are sales, you have the access, but if no access is allowed for accounting, the manager comes in and they shouldn't have the access to post the journal entries because their accounting access is then gone in that condition. So with that consideration, if there is, let's say, somebody from accounting coming in, they will still see the button. But if there is no accounting access provided to that person, the only thing they can do is approve or refuse. And even after approved, until it's posted, you can still go back and refuse at some point. Maybe something changed or something is supposed to be modified. Now, in this case, up to this point where it's approved, Maria is also tracking the same thing. So if I go back in and come back as Maria, the seeing process of the whole thing for herself is available. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. That's the easiest password you can have. The way when we used to do this thing for ourselves, we used to set 1 2 3 as the password. Now there is a limitation for 8 characters at least.
Yeah.
Now in this case, if I go to this area right here and I remove this, you see this one done, this one done, nothing sitting here. It's sitting here in this process. Now being an accountant, since both of these things are to reimburse, if considering that I am the person handling through expenses, this is my menus, right? This is all the menus that's available to me. Expense to approve as a manager, to post as an accountant. This is the one that I see here. Since reimbursement is required, I can consider this to be in any of the journals that I have. So connecting to the payable process once over, but with one thing that changes. And I'll come to that because in this case, the accounts payable is not the account that you'll use, right? All the credit account. So essentially, every employee in your list has two addresses. Number one, the profile that's connected to their main user, if there is a user, or the private address on the employee. In this case, if we talk about it, the employee Maria Jones, the private address chart of account for payable will be picked if we use that. And I'll show you where that is set. In this case, right now, I'll post the journal entries as the accountant, depending on whether it's supposed to be reimbursed. And you can have two different things in here, right? One expense to reimburse, one expense not to reimburse. And the whole report, when you see this option, you have the option to register the payment, therefore taking care of the payables process. Otherwise, if we talk about the journal entry that's required for this, we go in, open up the journal entry. Right now, it's expenses accounts payable because it's supposed to be paid back. If it's supposed to be, let's say if I have a employee, Maria Jones. Now I'm skipping the whole process of recording expenses before creating a report. Maria week 22 expenses. Then add an expense line, create. Expense for traveling. $10. And since I'm the accountant, I can also control this thing if I need to change this on the go. We take this and make it go to hold on. This one I'll say it's going to company instead of going to the employee back. So we take this information here. Now you see, as soon as you make that change, the bank journal comes up because you have paid the expense directly from a bank journal. It could be your petty cash expense where they paid the money from. Now you're just trying to record that money going out. So you can take the cash retail or any other cash account or any other credit card as well. So if somebody's carrying the credit card, you can say that it's the Amex Gold that they use to pay for this expense, and this whole thing goes there. So in this case, if I submit to manager once over, since I have all the access, I can do the whole thing. It stops at this process, post journal entries, and it's done. Marks as paid, and the whole journal entry will be directly into the final accounts right away. Expenses directly from the bank account. Then you reconcile with this credit card on the reconciliation process, and you're good to go.
As long as they put the right expense in the first place.
Yes. But it's all editable, or we can kick it back to them and make them fix it.
One thing I see as a problem is the same thing. too many user rights issues right now that are going to give you more trouble down the road, because people will be able to see the post expense buttons, see the payment buttons and everything. So control the user rights. Any employee that should not have access to this thing should not be able to approve, post, or do anything. So at least the expense module is covered, as because this is a new thing that we install. Nobody has rights for it right now. So you'll have to define the rights as to who gets what. Unless you do that, everybody's just a simple employee submitting their expenses.
So would you prefer that they have, like, each employee can enter their own, or would you prefer that the managers enter it on behalf of the employee?
Well, I'm fine with the employees entering it, but when you're doing it for the company, and like most oftentimes I see it's paid on the wrong card or the wrong payment method. And now that you can't edit, you have to start over if it's on the wrong card or the wrong bank account.
What happened to that? Why
Mm.
can't we set to draft and edit those and put it to the right thing and resave it? I have to start over.
The thing is, in this condition, the entries are not done until somebody from accounting has checked. So it's not them selecting which account, it's you selecting which account.
So Karen will be able to change if, and we're just gonna throw names out there. So let's say Brandon goes to lunch and puts it on Amex Sky.
He won't be doing that.
Gold, then when she looks at it, she
Okay.
can fix it.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Brandon
So
has all access, so he could actually do that, but he usually doesn't, so.
That was just
But the
trying to
thing is,
throw a name out there. Pick on him today.
Well, I was just thinking of someone that had full access. It could be Garrett, and same thing.
Yeah.
this is actually why I think the employees should have the access directly to submit their expenses, and the managers just come in to approve, not even post, nothing. The accountant, who in this case will be you, Karen, does this thing. So just for the ease of things, if we start looking at the reports available here, this is all for the my expenses section. So the employee, manager, all the accountant, they'll all have access, but the employee can only see their own. The team approver can only see their teams. The all approver can see everything. Expense reports, multiple access, and then all reports all at once can also be available. So this is the three levels: to approve, to post, to pay. To pay only comes in if you have a reimbursement. Now, expense analysis is just a pivot report and a graph maker or some report maker that you can use. The same thing that you have on other modules, it has that information. So you can look at the total amount, right, for each employee each month that they submitted, and on the basis of the expense type as well, right? So if you take a look at the paid by, you can see how much they paid, how much the company paid, and what is their status. You can also work through this thing. So all of this factor is available in the configuration. It takes you to the expense products menu. Don't take it wrong, this is still the products menu, but with this expense products menu, the view is different. So you'll only be creating services and creating them in the all category with the expense account attached to it. If you go back and try and find them in the list of all products and other modules, you will still see them. And one good way to find them in any other list is going to the products menu and going and checking which products can be expensed. So you see both of these are available. And when you open through here, it shows you the overall menu for the product, not just a limited access thing like in the expense module. So it's for the ease of the user. Now, since employee expenses also connect to the payable cycle at some point where you need to pay back to them, you have the employee expenses menu right here, and you'll only be able to see directly based on the preset filter the ones that you need to post or the ones you need to pay. This one from Maria initially, we have is still in the to pay process. Register payment, and wherever you paid it from goes from there. One other thing going into employees, in the case of expense reporting, although Maria does have a profile that's defined here with the same name and everything, but if you go into the private information, that's another contact. So that's the private address. Only a handful of people, depending on the access levels, can see these addresses in the list as well. So you say whichever account needs to be there for expense management or the credit management, you can pick this account and use this one.
Oh,
So this is the
that's,
contact.
so then when you
That's it.
print a check, it'll pull that address instead of whatever's on their account.
In the expense module, it automatically uses this one. So if I say this needs to be changed into Maria Jones private,
But
and I
then will
go,
the word private print on the check?
in the check printing process, you will still keep the same name. I'm just trying to show you that this address is kind of really different for Maria Jones. So in this case,
I asked because we have a use case scenario where people don't want their last name given to the customer. And so they change the name on their profile in Odoo to just be their first name so the customer can't see their last name. Well, then you go to print them a check and their last name isn't on their check unless you go change their account.
there is a good way out of that. So you add a bank account and you define the title on the bank account to be a different name. That way you can still have this thing go. So in this case, you see there is a bank account option. If I say this is the bank account that gets used, create and edit for Maria, account holder name Maria Jones, and then account holder Jones private. The reason why I added the name private to this contact is to be able to find, because there is a bunch of Maria Jones already in the list, right? Which one is this and the one that's being used here? You can have a completely different payables account attached to it, and that is the one that is going to be used. Because I know for a fact that it's not accounts payable that you use for this kind of scenario.
So meanwhile, my hope is they can only create the expense from the right user. So it should
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I didn't
go
realize
only to
Maria
the-
had so many, so if it's her and not other people with
Right.
that name, then I'll try and merge them.
Right. And what I was thinking is, at least on this particular thing, when we're doing it from my expenses, she can only create it from one place. So you're only
Yeah.
paying the one thing.
She can only create
whichever
Right. So it should go to be paid to only that.
hopefully.
Unless something weird happens in between.
there is a fail safe for this. Hold on. You see, when you choose an employee, a single employee, an employee is always required. If the user doesn't have an employee attached to them, they cannot create an expense report. So you have one employee per user, and then one employee per user means one private address only. And no selections have to be made.
But Jasmine has 2 accounts.
Because she's with 2 companies.
I don't
So
know.
if
To look and see.
Or it could be.
I
Sorry.
haven't had a chance to look and see yet. So.
Because I know she has to do a DRC inventory. That's the only reason I say that.
Mhm.
Sarah could too.
Yeah, Lexi, I think, does because she has a DRC account and an NMH account.
And just to verify on that fact, when we print a check, it goes to a specific factor. Let me see if I can go into the check printing process and verify if this name on the check is coming up.
Okay.
Hold on. Accounting and
Eat while we do that. It's like,
payments.
you won't offend me.
You see, so Karen, you can see that the vendor here is the profile that we just talked about, Maria Jones private, not the usual contact user or anything. And one more thing is, in the user settings, there is a control access that you can have deciding who in the system can see the private addresses as well. Not everybody should be able to see those addresses, because there is a
Right.
lot of home addresses, phone numbers, emergency contacts, and everything that are attached to the private address. So it might be a privacy issue for the employees as well. So you see, this controls who can see it. So access to private addresses for Tracy is enabled, but not all people should have this access, at least outside accounting and HR. HR and accounting are the only people that should have access to something like this. Now, coming back to the payments, if I go in, this payment is posted with the option. I click on print check. Let me see. Actually, the account never came through. But in the case when the account comes through, because we just added the account after the fact, the account selection will make sure that it's the account name that's being picked. If I say Maria Jones,
Yeah, so it printed the private on the check.
Mm-hmm.
because it's coming from the contact at the moment.
Yep.
Let me verify. It's not usually when you come through the bill, it's the account selected there. Right now, it's still doing this thing. I'll have to check and verify why the vendor bill situation was not done right. Maybe because we added the account after the vendor bill was created, which we also can check. Maria posted. Maria Jones.
Leave it to me to find the hiccups.
Well,
Yeah.
if it was printing that on the check, we don't notice.
I'll take a look at that. So that's not a thing to worry about at the moment. But the thing is, remembering that it's the private address being picked every time somebody does an expense, it calls for two things. Number one, the employee should be there. And when we talk about the email factor as well, when we activate emailing to create expenses, you also have to have an employee email address attached to that email that's being used to send. That way, Odoo identifies which employee it is that's submitting the expense report. So that's the whole overall module. Nothing too fancy, especially no accounting related things right off the bat for the employee to see. Right, they can just come in and create their expenses and then create a report at the end. Manager sees it, approves or refuses. It goes forward to the accountant at that point. That's the first time accounting is being involved. And if it needs to be reimbursed, the to pay step is gonna be there as the next one. Any questions that you think we have right off the bat?
No, you have the recording for this, right?
Yes,
I only ask because there's too many things to remember, even just
I can
today.
understand.
Yes.
I can understand. A lot of these things I'm training for. Not so. I have understood this over the years that the first training session has to be an introductory thing. So we create as many reference points in your mind. When you think about something, oh, we talked about this at that point, so you can reflect back and find out if it's the thing that we should have. Because a lot of the times what I've seen is you don't even know something is there if you don't have a reference point. And I've seen that a lot in the simulation session. So you now know that there is an expense module, it does XYZ and things. How to do them could be another follow-up sessions, maybe 2 months down the road, when you actually start working and roll it out to the overall employees. So I'll still go ahead and compile all the sessions into a single space on your e-learning. So you should be able to find all of that and reflect back to this whole conversation if required as a first resort, or you can send in a ticket and schedule a different session after the fact. So
Thank
this
you.
is the overall expense module.
And that's in
Any
employees, right?
nope. It
Okay,
has its
where's
own.
expenses? Because I don't see the little button there.
It's the expenses itself.
Apparently, I'm looking for it in alphabetical order. I just can't see it on the screen. Sorry.
I still have to, because these up to this point everything was in alphabetical order, but then we install a bunch of other modules, and then once everything is set and agreed on, I'll go back and do it in the alphabetical order again.
Okay. I just get confused easily, and the pictures keep changing.
Yeah, the rearranging.
I do too. So my process really is just to type in expenses on the go.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't find the module icons anymore.
Okay.
Thank you, Zubair.
All right. And one thing to remember, the module is already installed and is ready to go on your production instance as well. But in multiple cases, you don't have the user rights, number one. You don't have the approver set to the profiles. You don't have the expense products. So rolling it out today is going to need a lot of data entries on your end to make sure everything's set right. This is why no announcements related to any of the modules installed were done. Eli knows that we have installed these, right? And then they're ready to go. So if I go for expenses, everything that we discussed is all already there. The whole module and even the initial 2 types of expenses, they're set.
Okay.
So just change them and make them yours by changing the settings, and then control for the user rights, and you should be good to go.
Okay. It's its own
Awesome.
project.
All right. Next we're meeting in about 15-20 minutes, so we'll take a quick break and come back. Remember the discussion that we had around creating the invoices automatically when the deliveries were done? I have
Yes,
figured out a way,
Okay.
but there is a few hiccups that we have to discuss, because remember you sent in a ticket, Karen, yesterday around the 2 invoice activities were being created all over the place. The same
Yes.
thing will happen with this auto invoicing process, and the reason why I didn't want to go there initially was because in a manual process you can cancel an activity and not do an invoice, but if the system's doing the invoices, you will end up with wrong data all across. So
Okay.
let's review that. I'll show you everything, and
Okay.
we'll see where we get taken from there.
We'll
Okay.
see that in a few minutes. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Bye.